In this lecture, we are going to get back into WordPress development. Our goal is to finish our theme. Throughout the past few sections, we've been developing various templates. However, we ran into some roadblocks. WordPress did not have an appropriate block for creating specific UI elements. As a last resort, the HTML block can be a quick and easy way to add a UI element. However, it's not ideal. Changing the behavior or appearance of a block is not possible unless you have knowledge of HTML and CSS. For the best possible user experience, we should use blocks that can be easily editable. The solution becomes clear. We should write our own blocks. WordPress allows us to easily do so. Before getting into block development, there's an important question to consider. Should our blocks be developed with a plugin or theme? Either solution is valid. In a technical sense, you're not required to develop a plugin for a theme. WordPress exposes its APIs to both plugins and themes. What's possible in plugins is also possible in themes. The code is 95% the same. So, why bother creating a plugin? In my opinion, a theme should focus on providing a design for a site, whereas a plugin should focus on extending the core of WordPress. This rule is not absolute. There are themes that extend WordPress heavily without creating a separate plugin. At the end of the day, the choice is yours. For this course, we will create a separate plugin for adding blocks to our theme. This way, our blocks are not coupled with our theme. They may be installed on other themes. In addition, if our clients don't need our blocks, they can disable our plugin. Separating our code base gives them that option. It can potentially reduce bloat. WordPress makes it painless to create a plugin. The requirements for creating a plugin are lower than for creating a theme. We can easily create a plugin within a few minutes. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a page called Header Requirements. Registering a plugin is similar to registering a theme. We must create a file with a header. Inside the header, we can provide information on our plugin. On this page, a minimal example is provided. The single piece of information required by WordPress is the name of our plugin. Below the example, the documentation will provide a comprehensive list of possible headers that can be added to a plugin. For a complete example, you can open the example below the list. Let's copy this example. Next, point your editor to the wp-content/plugins directory. Plugins must be uploaded to the plugins directory. Inside this directory, plugins must have a dedicated directory. As you can see, each plugin has a separate directory. For our plugin, let's create a folder called Udemy Plus. Next, we must create a plugin file. Unlike themes, the name of the file can be anything. Frequently, developers will call the file index.php or after the folder's name. For example, let's take a look at the FigurePress plugin. Inside this folder, there are two files called index.php and FigurePress.php. Inside the index.php file, the developer has created an empty PHP file. Looks strange, right? However, it's considered good practice to create an index.php file to prevent hackers from viewing the folder structure of a site. Unfortunately, there are companies that don't disable the ability to view a server's directory. To combat this, an index file can be created to display a blank page. Let's switch over to the FigurePress file. Inside this file, a header can be found. As you can see, developers may prefer to use the plugin's name as their main plugin file. Alternatively, you can use a completely random name. For this course, let's stick to a file called index.php to reduce confusion. Inside our plugin folder, create this file. Inside the file, add an opening PHP tag and paste the header from the documentation. WordPress will scan the plugins folder for new plugins. In each folder, it'll scan the root files. If it finds a file header in one of them, it'll register our plugin with WordPress. The information placed inside a header will be extracted and displayed to the user. Let's update the example from the documentation to suit our plugin. Starting from the top, we have a header called plugin name. This header should be set to a human-readable name of our plugin. Let's set the name to Udemy Plus. While the other headers are optional, we should add them for convenience. The following header is called plugin URI. This header should be set to the URL where our plugin can be found. Let's set the URL to udemy.com. Afterward, we can provide a description of our plugin. This description will appear on the plugins page. Let's set the description to the following: a plugin for adding blocks to a theme. The next header is called version. You should update this header during updates to your plugin. We are currently developing our plugin. Let's set the version to 1.0.0. Following the version header, we can configure the minimum WordPress version for our plugin. If this plugin is installed on an unsupported version of WordPress, it'll be rejected. Let's set the requires at least header to 5.9. A minimum PHP version can be configured with the requires PHP header. This header should be set to 7.2. We're going to limit support to the latest versions of PHP. These versions are secure and updated. Feel free to use a higher version if newer versions are released. Up next, we can set the author of the plugin. This header should be set to your name or your team's name. Let's set the author header to Udemy. The next header is called author URI. If you're a commercial seller, you may want to provide a URL for purchasing additional plugins. Let's set the URL to udemy.com. There are two headers called license and license URI. You can set the license to the name of the license of your plugin, whereas the license URI should point to a page with a license summary. For this plugin, we are not going to sell it. Let's remove these headers. The update URI header is a recent addition to the file headers collection. WordPress has been around for almost 2 decades. Thousands of plugins are available in the ecosystem. It's possible that plugins may have duplicate names. WordPress may accidentally update a plugin with the wrong codebase. To prevent that from happening, you can point to an exact URL that ships updates. For our plugin, we are not going to need this header. Up next, the text domain header should be set to a unique ID for our translations. We don't want our translations to get mixed with other translations. The text domain of a plugin should be unique. In most cases, developers will use the name of their plugin folder as the name of the text domain. Let's set the text domain header to Udemy Plus. Lastly, we can add a path to our translations. This path should be relative to our plugin. For this example, let's set the path to languages. Our plugin is ready. Additional files or code is not necessary. The minimum requirement for creating a plugin is a PHP file with a header. Let's head over to the plugins page. On this page, refresh it for a complete list of our plugins. Perfect. The Udemy Plus plugin is appearing on the list. Our header has been extracted to display the information presented on this page. Let's activate our plugin. After a few moments, our plugin should be active. By activating a plugin, WordPress will always load the main plugin file. From our plugin file, we can begin registering blocks, styles, or adding pages to the admin dashboard. The first step of our plugin journey is completed. Let's continue developing our plugin in the next lecture.